OLE, the utopian world of online education.
Hello students, welcome to OLE. This is your chemistry class and we are studying a chapter that is named as acid, bases and salts. In the previous session we have discussed something about the acids, for example types of acid, concentration of acid and the sources of acid, etc. And in this session we are going to discuss about bases. Okay. So first of all, let me tell you that bases are of two types. Everything dissolves in water, right? So bases also dissolves in water, but there are some bases that can be soluble in water, whereas there are some bases that cannot be soluble in water. So there are two types of bases, that is soluble in water and insoluble in water. Right. So those bases which can be dissolved in water or which are soluble in water are regarded as alkali. Whereas those bases which cannot be dissolved in water or are insoluble in water are regarded as bases itself. Okay. So we can say that all alkalis are bases, but all bases are not alkalis. Why? Because alkali is that base which can be dissolved in water and bases are those which cannot be dissolved in water. So there is always a sentence like this, that an alkali is a base but a base is not an alkali. So this is the thing, this is the reason why a base cannot be an alkali. Now, what is a base and what is an alkali? Base. Okay. What is a base and what is an alkali? So, bases are those compounds. Bases are those compounds which react with hydronium ions of acid. Hydronium ions, that is written as H3O positive, of acids to form salt and water. For example, NaOH plus HCl, that will give out NaCl plus water. So in this, NaOH is a base whereas HCl is an acid. So whenever a base reacts with an acid, it always forms salt and water. So bases are those compounds which react with hydronium ions of acids to form salt and water. Now you will ask, okay, what is an alkali then? Alkali are those bases which whenever they dissolved in water, as I have told you that alkali is always dissolved in water, it can be soluble in water. So what is an alkali? Alkali are those bases which whenever they react in water or whenever they dissolve in water, they form hydroxide ions. What will they form? They will form hydroxide ions. Okay, they will form hydroxide ions. ठीक? So whenever they dissolved in water, whenever an aqueous solution for this is made, they will form a hydroxide ions. ठीक है? So bases समझ में आया? दो तरीके के bases होते हैं, soluble और insoluble. बेसिस ऐसे कंपाउंड्स होते हैं जो एसिड के साथ रिएक्ट करके क्या बनाते हैं? सॉल्ट और वाटर बनाते हैं. ठीक है. एल्कली जो है वो ऐसे कंपाउंड्स होते हैं जो कि बेस जो कि जब वाटर में डिसॉल्व किए जाते हैं, उनका जब एक्वस सोल्यूशन बनाया जाता है, यहाँ पे आप इस रिएक्शन को ऐसे भी लिख सकते हैं. वेन एवर यू राइट दिस रिएक्शन लाइक दिस, ब्रैकेट में जब भी आप एक्वस लिखेंगे, दैट मीन्स इट इज ऑलरेडी डिसॉल्व्ड इन वाटर. ठीक है, अगर हम यहाँ पे सिर्फ NaOH लिखते हैं फिर वाटर लिखेंगे, दैट मीन्स वी आर डिसॉल्विंग दिस सोडियम हाइड्रोक्साइड इनटू द वाटर. वेयर एज जब आप NaOH एक्वस फॉर्म में लिख रहे हैं, आई हैव टोल्ड यू व्हेनेवर कि जब भी एसिड या बेस वाटर में मिलाया जाता है तो वो एक एक्वस फॉर्म ले लेता है. तो इफ आई हैव रिटन हियर इन द ब्रैकेट इट इज एक्वस, दैट मीन्स इट इज ऑलरेडी डिसॉल्व्ड इन वाटर. सो when after dissolving in water, it will dissociate and will form hydroxide ions. Here I have taken the same example of NaOH. Here I have also taken the same example of NaOH. Why? Because alkali can be taken as base and alkali as well. Let me give you another example for this. For example, copper oxide, whenever it reacts with hydrochloric acid, it forms CuCl2, that is copper chloride, plus H2O, that is water. So here NaOH is an alkali because it can be dissolved in water, it can form aqueous solution, whereas जो आपका कॉपर ऑक्साइड है, दिस इज प्योरली अ बेस, इट इज नॉट एन एल्कली. ओके, दिस इज अ बेस, दिस इज एन एल्कली. मैंने आपको दोनों एग्जांपल दिए हैं टू प्रूव दैट alkali can be a base but base cannot be an alkali. ये alkali था, मैंने इसको base के फॉर्म में भी आपको रिएक्शन लिख के दिखाई and alkali में भी आपको रिएक्शन लिख के दिखाई. That means alkali can be a base, whereas copper oxide is a base, it is not an alkali. Why? Because copper oxide does not dissolve in water. So this is a base and this cannot be written in the category of an alkali. Okay, so I hope आपको ये दो चीजें, the difference between an alkali and a base, आपको अच्छे से समझ में आया होगा. Alkali is soluble in water, alkali can be dissolved in water and can be made as an aqueous solution, whereas bases cannot be dissolved in water. Whenever alkali is dissolved in water, it yields hydroxide ions. Whenever bases reacts with the hydronium ions of an acid, it will form salt and water. Okay, so now we are going to discuss about the types of bases. As I have told you that alkalis can be called as bases, but bases cannot be called as alkali. That means alkali are bases but bases are not alkali. So now from now onwards we are going to use the term alkali. So we are going to learn about the types of alkali. Okay, types of alkali. So as we have distinguished the types of acid on some bases, we are also going to distinguish the types of alkali on some bases. The first one is strength of an alkali, strength of an alkali, and the second one will be concentration of an alkali. Okay, concentration of an alkali. Just similar as the acids, strength, according to the strength of an alkali, alkali can be distinguished as an weak alkali and strong alkali. Weak alkali and strong alkali. So what is a weak alkali? What is a weak alkali? What is a strong alkali? Whenever alkali is dissolved in water, it yields hydroxide ions. It yields hydroxide ions. You know this. So weak alkali, what will be the weak alkali? Weak alkali will be such alkali that will yield less concentration of hydroxide ions. So weak alkali on dissolving with water on dissolving with water yields less concentration of hydroxide ions, and just opposite to that, what will be the strong alkali? Strong alkali will yield more concentration of hydrogen or more concentration of hydroxide ions. Okay, so let me give you an example for weak alkali. The example for weak alkali will be NH4OH in its aqueous state, means it is already dissolved in water. So whenever an NH4OH, that is ammonium hydroxide, in its aqueous state dissociates, it will dissociate into the ammonium ions and hydroxide ions, as same as the weak acids, because as I have told you in the previous session that weak acids do not dissociate completely, or weak acid dissociates partially. Similarly, weak alkali will also dissociate partially and hence will yield less concentration of hydroxide ions. Okay, so whenever the ammonium hydroxide will dissociate on dissolving with water, it will not completely dissociate and thus it will yield less concentration of hydroxide ions. Okay, now we come to the strong alkali. What will be strong alkali do? Whenever it will be dissolved in water, first thing it will completely dissociate. The very first thing that strong alkali will do, that it will completely dissociate. What it will do? It will completely dissociate. Okay, and the next thing, it will yield larger concentration or larger quantity. It will yield larger concentration or larger quantity of hydroxide ions. So strong alkali and weak alkali are equally opposite to each other. That strong alkali will yield larger concentration, or we can use the more appropriate word as higher concentration of hydroxide ions. Okay, so first thing that a strong alkali will do, strong alkali will completely dissociate and it will yield higher concentration of hydroxide ions. So what will be the example of strong alkali? The example of strong alkali can be KOH in its aqueous form. Okay, so whenever KOH in its aqueous form dissociates, it will dissociate into potassium ions and hydroxide ions. Because it is dissociating completely, it will yield higher concentration of hydroxide ions. Okay, and similarly the sodium hydroxide in its aqueous form, whenever it will dissociate on dissolving with water, it will dissociate into sodium ions and hydroxide ions. Because it will dissociate completely, hence it will yield larger concentration of hydroxide ions. Okay. Now, concentration of an alkali. As you have know, whenever we dissolve an alkali or an acid with water, it will form an aqueous solution. So, if the percentage of alkali is higher, it will known as concentrated alkali. So, on the basis of concentration, alkali can further be divided as dilute alkali or concentrated alkali. concentrated alkali. Okay. So whenever we dilute an alkali, we dissolve an alkali into the water, if the percentage of alkali or the percentage of concentration of alkali is lower in that given aqueous solution, it will be regarded as dilute alkali, whereas if the percentage of concentration of alkali will be higher in the given solution, in the given aqueous solution, it will be regarded as concentrated alkali. So this was about the types of alkali. Okay, so alkali on the basis of strength are of two types: weak alkali, strong alkali. On the basis of concentration, dilute alkali and concentrated alkali. One more thing I would like to add to this is that alkali or bases, we can say bases or alkali which we are talking about is bitter in taste. They are bitter in taste. टेस्ट में कड़वे होते हैं. ओके, जब भी आप टेस्ट करेंगे, द bases are generally bitter in taste and they turns the red litmus blue. They turns red litmus to blue. Okay. So these are some of the characteristics of alkalis, or we can say the bases. I hope I was clear on this topic. In the next video, we are going to discuss about the chemical properties of an acid, how they react with different substances, different elements present around us, and what they do, what is their characteristic nature. In short, we will be studying the chemical properties of acids. Till then, stay tuned. Take care. Bye-bye.